Hi, I'm Terry Likes, and welcome to this edition of Communication Connection, a program that highlights the accomplishments of students, faculty, and alumni involved with the Department of Communication here at Mississippi State. Well, it's always nice when alumni come back and visit the campus, but in this particular edition, we're focusing on someone who's coming back to campus on a full-time role. Josh Foreman, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And welcome back to campus. You're a graduate of the university, and in this case, you're coming back as a professor in journalism and in a dual role overseeing the Reflector, the new student newspaper. So
Yes.
Take us back to the beginning when you were an undergraduate.
Well, 2000 is when I first came to Mississippi State as a student, and I grew up with 5 younger siblings. So my house in the Jackson area was so chaotic. My mom always joked when I got to Mississippi State, I just walked away and that was the end of it. I didn't ever feel sad, but it took me a couple of years to figure out that I wanted to study journalism, but the Reflector is really how I got into it. So about my beginning of my junior year, I got involved in the Reflector and then sort of worked my way up for 3 years up to the editor-in-chief role, and it was just a really important experience for me.
And you've accomplished a lot in the last 14 years or so since graduating, including some time overseas. Kind of bring us up to speed as to what you've done since you graduated.
Yeah, I big into journalism when I was here, and I always thought, you know, I'll work for a paper in Mississippi and just be a journalist. But I got this idea that I wanted to go abroad and teach for a year. So it was easy back in '05 to get a job in Korea. There were lots of jobs, so I got a job, flew over there, and I liked it so much, and I met so many great people. I met my wife that I ended up staying for 9 years. So for 9 years I lived in Korea and traveled, took a year off to travel around Asia. So, you know, in that time I kind of got back into journalism in a role at a magazine in Korea. So, but it was a great time.
And I know that while you were here as an undergrad, you worked with now retired, but Professor Frances Mcdavid, and how she's been an influence on you. And now you're coming back in a role that she once served in as the advisor for the Reflector.
Frances Mcdavid, the way that I put it before, I knew Frances Mcdavid when I was here as a student, and you know, she was a great mentor. She was always there. She was friendly. We spent so much time together, and I really did look up to her as a mentor. I thought, well, I'll leave Mississippi State and then I'll meet the next Frances Mcdavid. And the years went by and I'm sitting here going, oh wait, there is no other Frances Mcdavid. She's one of a kind. So she was, I still haven't met anyone quite like her. And I'm grateful to her for everything she taught me and for just being there to the present day. We still stay in touch.
Well, how does it feel to return to the campus and now in this role as the Reflector? Your first days on campus now in an advisor role.
I keep thinking something's wrong because my life is too good. I get to hang out at the Reflector office with the Reflector student journalists and teach photography and teach journalism, and I'm just waiting for what's going on here? Why is my life so good now? So it feels great. I'm happy to be here, and every day just feels fun. It doesn't feel like work.
Well, that's great. Give us, for those who are not as familiar with the Reflector, most people know what a student newspaper is, but it has a rich history here on campus, and maybe fill in some details on how many students you oversee and how the frequency of publication, things like that.
Okay. So the Reflector is a very old newspaper. It goes back to 1884, so it's almost as old as the university itself. And I think we've got some pictures of some of the old Reflector staffs. If you look at the pictures through the years, the look of the staffs has changed very much. It was basically looked like a military cadet kind of thing back in the early 20th century, and it's kind of, then you get the gangster phase with all the the fedora hats and the jackets. But right now we've got, let me think, we've got about upwards of 10 editors, and each editor has a handful of writers. So there are a lot of people involved in making the Reflector. The Reflector is student run, not only editorially but also financially. We have very little funding, if any, from the university. And we actually pay out over $40,000 a year to student writers, photographers, designers, editors. So, that's kind of the makeup of the staff there. We publish 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, and that it has been that way, I believe, since the 60s, so we've had that schedule for a long time.
And it's not just students within the Department of Communication, it's made up of students from all across the campus, isn't it?
Our editor-in-chief right now, Mia Rodriguez, is actually an English major.
Mm-hmm.
We've got at least a couple of English majors. We've got business. We've got, let me think. We do have a couple communication as well, journalism, so we really do have a mix of students there. Mm-hmm.
Well, we both have a background in journalism, so I'm a little biased, but I feel the importance of student media, whether it's television or newspaper or other forms, the campus radio station, provide real opportunities for students on campus and part of that campus life, as well as training young journalists. It's a vital role, I think, in what we do as part of the university.
Absolutely. As great as our journalism classes are at the university, the Reflector adds something that you can't get in a class. It's a very practical experience. It teaches you have to make decisions that actually affect people in the community. So it's kind of in my mind, it's the one block that you need to put in there to have that complete journalism education. Or if you're involved in broadcast, get involved in the at the TV center or at the radio station. Mm-hmm.
One of the things college campuses have been stressing in recent years is a concept called media literacy, and that's educating the public beyond the campus, the entire community within that city, as far as how to consume the media and do so wisely. There are even classes in media literacy, and some campuses produce classes for the community in media literacy. How do you see this as a role in an ever-changing society where media is constantly changing?
Well, I'll look at it from a kind of a student training perspective. So we have, let's just say around about 40 to 50 students who are involved in the Reflector. Every one of those students on a day-to-day basis is getting that education in media literacy. There's this constant dialogue about sources. Is this source acceptable? Do we need more sources? Is this interview reliable? What do we need to corroborate this? So from that perspective alone, we're educating students on how to be literate and how to evaluate sources and how to produce information that is reliable and truthful. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this kind of logically leads into the next question of our country was founded on First Amendment rights and principles, in this case, freedom of the press. And yet the press in recent times has been under attack, and not to get political here, but fake news allegations. There was a time back in the 60s and 70s when surveys showed that Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. But I think things have kind of changed as far as public perception of journalism.
Well, what is journalism now? There's so many different new forms of media that have come around that we're still trying to play catch up to figure out what is all this stuff. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it truthful? Is it honest? Is it necessary? But one statistic that I like to keep in mind is about the time that I graduated from Mississippi State with a degree in communication journalism, it was, if you look at the numbers, it was a high point for revenue for newspapers. And with more revenue, you have more journalists working. The numbers, everybody probably knows, the numbers took a nosedive around 2007. And from 2007 to the present day, that traditional journalist job, revenue dropped by about half. Newsrooms started cutting staff. So, it's really declined by about half. Traditional journalists, now there are a lot of new media journalists out there doing their thing, but to me that means now every working journalist has to do the work of two because you're missing one. So I think it's more important than ever for journalists to be working and to be doing hard work and be even taking up the slack, because there aren't as many full-time paid journalists as there were in the mid-2000s.
Coming back to campus here as a focal point, a lot of students today don't necessarily pick up a newspaper. Here on campus, I think they enjoy getting the newspaper and seeing what's going on, but in society, they've obviously moved to other devices as far as getting their information. So how do you view the changing role of students as consumers here on campus?
It's something that you'll never convince students to go back to reading newspapers primarily. It's just not going to happen. So when I walked into the Reflector newsroom as the advisor, I started learning they're doing things that I've never had to do, that I don't know how to do, in terms of scheduling content to come out on social media at certain times. They've got programs. Brandon Grisham, who's our excellent online editor at the Reflector, he's got programs that will release content on a schedule, and he's thought it all through, and this is where we want this content to go, and this is when we want it to be released. And that's something that I never had to do as a writer, or as a journalist. So they're on top of it. I think they have a better handle on that new habits of consumption than people from my generation, which was, I'm one generation behind them. So.
Well, and I always enjoyed being able to pick up the physical newspaper, and I still do on Tuesdays and Fridays. Where can one find the newspaper, either a physical hard copy or online?
We have, I think, over 200 boxes around campus and around Starkville, so you can find the physical copy of the paper almost everywhere. Any campus building, bus stops, so it's not hard to find the physical paper. Our website is reflector-online.com, and we have a great website that is managed with a lot of care. There's a lot of content that goes on there. We have some excellent photographers working for the Reflector, and the great thing about digital is you get to see the photo in all its glory. So even if the print photo doesn't look that great, maybe some colors bled, you get that beautiful, perfect digital image to go look at on our website. So, it's easy to find. It's out there. And we have social media presences also.
Maybe just real quickly, some goals for the Reflector as you're taking over.
Goals are, we want students to get that reporting education. So I've seen editors, there's a bit of a buzz in the newsroom right now. I've seen editors in the last 2 weeks filling out Freedom of Information Act requests. And to me, that means they are doing reporting. They're sending these requests out to government organizations, requesting information that's hard to get. And that is the number one priority, I think, is to give them that journalism education. Our newsroom is fantastic. It's big. There's tons of space, but we need to update it. So we're working on bringing in some new furniture, getting rid of some old furniture, building a photo studio. We've got studio equipment, and we're kind of putting together the pieces to build that photo studio. So those are a few of our goals.
Josh, thank you very much for joining us. That's all for this edition of Communication Connection. Please join us next time.